In this episode, Robert Plant, Edgar Winter, and Bernie Marsden.
Another album now then that divides people to a certain degree. I think there's an argument to say that this is Robert Plant's best solo album. I really do. When I first got this in 1993, Fate of Nations, I thought it was wonderful. I still do. And it's another album which is right up there in my sort of top 20, top 30 all-time albums. It was Robert Plant's sixth solo album, and the album kicks off with a track called Calling to You, which a lot of people say is Robert Plant calling to Jimmy Page, saying, come on, let's start doing something again. It's time, enough time has passed since John Bonham's death. We can put Zeppelin together again, or we can do something else. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. You could equally as much argue that it's him sort of sending a message to David Coverdale, who was at that time collaborating with Page and covering some of those Zeppelin tracks live, and he was sort of saying, look, mate, they're my songs, I can do them better than you. As we've said in an episode before, way back at the beginning, I say way back in the beginning, we've only been going 6 months, but you know what I mean, where there's a Page and Plant bootleg where they actually cover a Cordell Page track, and Robert Plant sings it, which I think was his little get back. Anyway, we're getting off the point there. Anyway, after an almost sort of gentle intro, the track just comes to life as a complete, hard-hitting, maybe even almost fast-paced cousin of Kashmir type song. It's brilliant. You got that trademark sort of pouting Plant vocal where you're listening to it, you're thinking, what's he saying? Whatever. I'm sure I've got a 12-inch single version with about 6 different versions of it on as well, which is pretty interesting. There's some great guitar work on there from Kevin Scott McMichael and also Nigel Kennedy on the violin, who gives it a little bit of something extra as well. He perfectly sort of complements the riff, driving it along before it all explodes into some sort of frantic finale. It really is a wonderful track. Then you get Down to the Sea, which is less frantic but no less enjoyable. It's one of those, you can almost think of it as one of those funky workouts from Led Zeppelin 3, or one of those tracks that were recorded around that time that ended up on Physical Graffiti, and then you chuck a big chunk of Eastern mysticism added in there, and you've got pretty much the idea of what the song is all about. After that we get Come Into My Life, which is again, it's one of the slower songs. It's just like dripping with feeling and emotion. It is one of my favourite tracks on the album. It's one of these albums where it's difficult to pick your favourite songs. It's got so many good tracks on it, but I really do like that. It hits a sort of spot with me, that Come Into My Life, and it's great. And you've got backing vocals of Mary Brennan in there as well, and Phil Johnson's playing the harmonium, and Nigel Eaton's playing the hurdy-gurdy. So there's all sorts of stuff going on behind one of those passion-filled Plant vocals, and he's really nailing it for me at that point. Then we get, again, I think this album, whoever decided the running order for this album has done a really good job on it, because they've sort of got it right. A lot of times I'll say, I think that track should have been at the beginning, or that track should be somewhere else. This one, they get it right, because at that point we now, after we've had those 3 songs which were all different but all complemented each other, we then go into the 2 sort of more commercially sounding tracks on the album, just to sort of keep everybody sort of on the same page, or sort of keep everybody interested, those that might be starting to drift away. It's a perfect time to throw in those tracks, which you don't need me to talk about too much. I Believe, which is, that's one of the poppiest starts to a song that you'd ever from Robert Plant, I would have thought, and it's then the melody sort of takes over and transforms the song into a piece of commercially accessible 90s rock. It's just wonderful. And then after that, we get 29 Palms, which of course played to death on radio and MTV and all that sort of stuff. Robert Plant said it was his sort of tribute to the Mojave Desert and stuff, but also there's the thing in there that he's also referencing Alana Miles, with who he was touring, shall we say, at the time when he wrote it. So you have to note the Velvet Glove reference at the beginning of the song. Either of those two songs could be seen, to me anyway, as natural progressions to the track All My Love from the In Through the Outdoors Zeppelin album. They've got that sort of feel about them. The Power is back next with the Memory song, which opens up with a really heavy riff that remains prominent throughout, really. There's some acoustic guitar laid on the topping parts, but in truth the song really fails to go anywhere all that exciting. It's probably one of the few weak links on the album for me, but that may be down to the fact it's just followed 5 top notches, and maybe we were all ready for a little bit of a breather. Anyway, then what are we going to next? Well, we're going to the Tim Harding track, If I Were a Carpenter. And it's I almost think it's going to be difficult for some of these artists to take in somebody else's song, which is a fairly simple song, really, and trying to put your own sort of spin on it. And I don't think Robert Plant particularly does anything out of the ordinary, apart from just sing it very, very well. And it's nice, and it's obviously that's taking him right back to his sort of pre-Zeppelin folk days and all that, and harking back to his days in the Black Country playing folk music. It's great. Again, for me, I'm going back to Tim Harding. Tim Harding is a bit like Bob Dylan for me, not in the same sense entirely. A lot of people know that of the opinion that Bob Dylan is one of the greatest songwriters that there is, but he's also one of the worst singers that there is. I'm not suggesting that Tim Harding is a particularly bad singer. What I'm saying is that when you hear other people doing his songs, you appreciate them more. Scott Walker used to record quite a few of Tim Harding's tracks as well. And if you look through your record collection, maybe you're not a person who particularly looks where the songs come from. If you read the names of the composers on the label, you'll probably find Tim Harding and people coming up more often than you would think. And for me, I think it's better than the original, but Tim Harding fans will probably be sticking pins in a big fat blob of something which is resembling me now, but everything's subjective. Colours of a Shade comes next, and that's another one which I really like. I almost start off with some Spanish guitar from Martin Alcock, and he plays mandolin on that, as well as some alien pipes from Chris Hughes. So it's just got it's got all those different little sounds in there that most people don't use, which is, I think, one of the things that Robert Plant was always very good at is making the tracks sound just different to your standard sort of rock songs, even when they were basically at the heart of it, they were just rock songs, but he put those extra little things in, funny little instruments and different sort of arrangements and things behind it and all that, and to just make, he'd put the thing on before he started singing. This is a Robert Plant song, even though he hasn't started singing yet, because you can just tell that nobody else I can really think of that does that the way that he does. Again, if anybody else, anybody disagrees, well, I'm sure there's bound to be plenty of people who disagree with me, but if anybody can think of other people that do that, stick them in the comments. Come and join us on Facebook, on the Crush Custard Facebook page, where we have some really interesting little things being posted up by people who've discovered stuff, and then I'll ask you what other people think of things or whatever. So come and join in on that. I think we've got almost we've got over 150 people on there now, I think, and there's something happens every day, and you're all more than welcome to join that. One other thing to note about Colours of a Shade is that initially the non-UK versions of the album didn't have this on. They left it off for some reason. I don't know why. I think that's been rectified in later issues. So if you're not in the UK, or you bought this album when you were in the UK, have a look and see if you've got Colours of a Shade missing. If you've got Colours of a Shade missing, then you've got the first issue of it. Like I say, it was, I believe, rectified later on, but it's a curious thing. I don't know as to why that would have been left off, but apparently it was. After that, we get Promised Land, which is a return to the sort of more mainstream rock band sound, if you like. It's a fast-paced riff. Again, it wouldn't have been out of place on one of the later Zeppelin albums, probably. Not Presence or In Through the Outdoor, I would guess. For me, a bit like Memory Song, they're the two weakest songs that we've come to so far, and are in truth probably the two weakest tracks on the album. Then we go next into what is just a brilliant ending to the album to me, the tracks that finish it off. First of all, we get The Greatest Gift and Great Spirit. Now, some people have suggested that they are Robert Plant's most heartfelt vocals ever, and whilst that might not entirely be correct, they're definitely up there with the best of them. And one thing that you really can't deny, though, is certainly, to me anyway, this appears to be Plant's most sort of personal album. There seems to be things in this that he's putting in, and he's just got his sort of character and stuff all over it, really, for me. And that's great. The lyrics throughout, they give rare glimpses into his sort of inner feelings on a variety of subjects, and a posturing rock god hiding behind Tolkien themes and imagery is long gone on this album. What we've got here is an artist who's reached into the depths of their being and laying it all there for everybody to see, and really sort of saying what they think about certain things that are going on in the world and all that sort of stuff. And again, this sort of displaying this sort of love of all that ethnic stuff and the Eastern mysticism and everything. Well, a wonderful track, Great Spirit is. I mean, it's brilliant when it just starts on all singing that Great Spirit come and all that sort of stuff. It just, I can't imagine. I suppose there must be, but I can't imagine there's anybody that has not heard this album, because it's just, to me, I don't know why more people don't talk about it as much as they do, because you hear people constantly going on about Zeppelin and all that sort of stuff, and this to me is as good as the Zeppelin album. It really is. To get back to that Great Spirit and stuff, I mean, you actually do believe, by the time you finish that song, you honestly believe that Robert Plant believes every word he's singing in that song. He really does. And if he doesn't, then he's a great actor, and he probably should be in musical theatre or something, because he does just sound so believable. Everything that he sort of says in that track. There's an argument there that it's the best track on the album. Whether it is or not, I don't know, because there's lots of different things. I would pick a different favourite song on this album every day of the week, and there still probably wouldn't be enough days in the week. That's how much I do rate this album. And I'll keep going on about that, but I just want to get it across to people that it's, because people don't talk about it. Nobody really ever talks about it as a masterpiece or a defining moment in somebody's life. I think this is Plant's Robert Plant album. If I'm, whether he would or not, I don't know. I'm sure he doesn't spend his nights trawling through the internet seeing if anybody's talking about it. I'm sure he doesn't do that. But if he does, I'd be fascinated to know, because to me this would be, I would think he should be as proud of this album as any of the others that he's made, because to me it's truly wonderful, and it would be interesting to get the opportunity to ask him. So maybe one day we will. Who knows? Anyway, final track, network news, fast-paced, angry swipe at the purveyors and surveyors of the world's demise, and it's almost a parallel delivery of the previous track's message. If Great Spirit was saying it with love, the network news is saying it with mighty uncontrolled anger, and it's just a perfect way to end it, or end the whole thing off. It's just an enjoyable journey from the very first note of this album right through to the very last note, and it's quite a long album. I think it clocks in over an hour. It's wonderful. So there you go. I don't know how many times I can say it in one video about how much I like this, but Fate of Nations, I think it's unfairly looked on by many as Robert Plant's social conscience album. For me, it's the perfect Robert Plant album. That's the sort of bloke Robert Plant is, I think. Highlights all of his vocal and songwriting abilities, sees him reaching new heights as a lyricist, and he cares about things, and he cares about the world, and he's a sensible bloke to sit and have a chat with. And yeah, it's a great album. I think it's far superior to the Page Plant releases that followed it. It's the jewel in the crown of Plant's solo career for me. Some of the stuff he's done since has been great, but I don't think he's ever got anywhere near as good as this again. And I would say Led Zepp 2 is probably the only Robert Plant album which I prefer to this one.
The Man in the Attic.
Hello, Custard Peeps. Just going to be a quick one. Another hot day here in Londoninium. And the attic, as usual on days like this, is stifling. So I'm up here just for a quick one. And I just thought I'll dip into the first box, just by the loft hatch, flipped through a bit, pulled out an album, and I thought, yeah, that's a good one. And the one I pulled out is this, the Edgar Winter Group. They only come out at night. Released in 1972 on Epic Records. And yeah, a cool album. It did actually very well for Edgar Winter. This Edgar Winter is a kind of multi-instrumentalist. He plays like all sorts of stuff, all sorts of keyboards and a bit of guitar, and also plays saxophone as well. And who did he have with him on this album? Well, on bass and sundry other things, he had Dan Hartman, who after this actually went on, I think, to have a couple of disco hits. Dan Hartman. He had the great Ronnie Montrose on guitar and Chuck Ruff on drums. Now, Ronnie Montrose, we know, went on to great success with his own band, with Sammy Hagar, and when I saw Sammy Hagar solo at the end of the 70s and in the early 80s, he actually had Chuck Ruff in his band on drums. So kind of a bit like that scene we have here in England, people interchange between many, many groups. But yeah, there we go. They only come out at night. There's the rear of the sleeve, and it is one of those sort of odd gatefolds. And there it is. Pictures of the band. And yeah, what did we get? Well, it did well for them, this album. It actually got to, I think, number 3 in the Billboard Top 100. Or top 200, and it stayed on the charts for something like 80 weeks. So very good, and it was certified gold, and then some years later it was certified platinum. So what's it known for? What's this kind of style is it? Well, it's a rock album, of course. It couldn't be anything else. With Edgar Winter, Ronnie Montrose at the camp, but it's kind of not. I wouldn't call it a heavy rock. No, it's more the kind of approach you'd find from people like the Doobie Brothers. Terrific harmonies, very, very good songs. Dan Hartman and Edgar Winter writing the bulk of the material. Ronnie Montrose involved in there on one or two things. But yeah, Dan Hartman was a good songwriter. Edgar Winter, good songwriter. The principal tracks that you would all know would of course be the vocal led Free Ride, which is a really cool tune. Come on and take a free ride. A really, really good AM FM radio favourite in the early 70s. Very, very good. And of course the monster instrumental Frankenstein. And I remember seeing them on the old Grey Whistle Test doing that many years ago, and Whispering Bob introduced it as the Edgar with the group. They're going to do the Frankenstein, and they did it. And there was, of course, the percussion breaks in it, and he was playing timbales and everything. Edgar Winter, damn fine. But yeah, good. Lots of great harmonies on it, and quite a wide range of material. You can't go by the track list on the back because it's out of sequence with the way it is on the actual record. So let's extricate the record from the deck. There we go, on the good old yellow Epic Records label, and let's have a look at the tracks and see if I can tell you anything about them. I did play this briefly a bit earlier just to reacquaint myself with it. I haven't played it for a long time. I've had this since I was about 15 or 16, and I swapped a beaten up old acoustic guitar for this album, with a mate of mine. So yeah, back in the early 70s. We get the first track's called Hanging Around, written by Edgar Winter and Dan Hartman. Yeah, again, good sort of pop rock of the time. Again, very Doobie Brothers, nice harmonies. When It Comes, very good. Edgar Winter, Dan Hartman. Third track, Altamira, which is quite acoustic, quite sort of samba inflected pop, I suppose. Very, very good. And then Free Ride, which was actually written by Dan Hartman. Undercover Man closes side one, and that's an Edgar Winter track. It's a bit more rocky. Side two, we get one called Round and Round, which is Edgar Winter. Again, very Doobie Brothers in its approach, but again, that's not a bad thing. The Doobies were a really good band. Rock and Roll Boogie Woogie Blues by Edgar Winter, B. Winter, so I don't know who that is. Edgar Winter and Ronnie Montrose. That's the only songwriting credit that Ronnie Montrose gets on this. But again, he went on to good things with his own band, Montrose, of course, and then later on, Gamma, who are again an excellent band. Track 4, excuse me, I'm just going to look at the record again. We All Had a Real Good Time. And again, it's kind of a boogie, more piano and guitar-led thing. And the whole thing winds up, of course, with Frankenstein, which is a real blast. Yeah, good tune. And it's held up well. The whole album's held up well, actually. Very nicely produced. As I say, I wouldn't call it heavy rock at all, apart from probably Frankenstein. You would have to say that does rock a bit, and it is a terrific tune. And as I said, has held up well, stood the test of time. So, yeah, would I recommend this album? Well, yes, I would. You know, if you like early 70s American rock, if you like the James Gang, you like the Doobies, people like that, you would get off on this album. It's well produced, well sung, well written, and worth a look if you see it. I'm sure it's around on CD. I mean, as I say, this is probably the first time I've had this album out in a long time. But yeah, I might, on a cooler day and with a fan blowing or something, I might give it a blast through and reacquaint myself properly with it. But yeah, worth a look at. Edgar Winter Group, they only come out at night. Again, they're probably his most successful album ever. I mean, he did record albums with his brother. And he had the probably slightly more psychedelic, heavier Edgar Winter's White Trash as a band. And this definitely more commercial, definitely more FM friendly rock. So yeah, go for it. So goodbye again from the man in the attic on another hot day in London town. Take it easy, everyone, and we will see you soon.
Well, when we started this Crushed Custard channel, the idea was to get random numbers and pull the albums out the racks and talk about them as they came up. Now, when we started that off, one of the first ones that came up, and what in fact ended up being the first episode of the random album generator game, was Bernie Marsden and About Time Too. And we called that first episode And About Time Too because it quite simply was And About Time Too, because we'd been storing it for a few weeks while one or two other things were going on, and I wanted to individual reviews that we put out before that. But once the Random Album Generator game started, And About Time Too, Bernie Marsden was the first featured album. And now, as we knew what happened at some point, we're going to get duplicates, people are going to start coming out again, and Bernie Marsden has come out again. I think we've already featured not Pink Floyd, Rush, I think we've already featured twice. I'm going to think now that some of these episodes have not been aired yet. And I think Robin Trower's probably been featured more than once as well. One or two other people have probably had one or two name checks as well. But this is the first lengthier one, shall we say. Bernie Marsden, Stacks from 2005. Now, what is it, Stacks? Well, it's a mixture of sort of new self-penned blues tunes and old standards all put there through together. And I'm not going to go through all these tracks one by one. I'm just going to tell you that there isn't a bad track on it. You wouldn't expect it to be. Bernie Marsden is a top-notch guitar player. He's probably carved himself out a niche now as the number one blues guitar player. I think I'd say he's turned his back on all the rock stuff with Whitesnake and everything, but he's definitely gone more down the route of the blues and the acoustic stuff and whatever, and he seems to be perfectly happy with that lot. He seemed to me to be a perfectly natural guitar player and perfectly happy when he was in Whitesnake and Pace After Nord and other bands before, playing on a big stage in the big arenas and all that. But he also seems perfectly happy playing in small clubs. I saw him with I think it was a company of Snakes at a place called the Spice Ball Park in Banbury, and there can't have been more than 50 or 60 of us there. It didn't seem to faze him at all. He put in just the same amount of effort as he would have put in, I think, if there had been 100,000 people there. He seemed to me to be enjoying every minute of it. He was chatting with the people in the crowd, and he was just doing great stuff. I also remember seeing him in the Alaska days when he was playing the General Wolf in Coventry, which was just down the road from me. It was about 7 or 8 miles away from where I live, and probably about 3 miles away from where I was born. And we went down there, and I went down there to watch that with a few people I know, and bizarrely, some people who've been in a band with me before were in a support band, and when we were there watching the support band, they started playing one of our songs, and they hadn't told us they were going to do it, and they didn't know we were there either, and they actually announced it as their own track, which was a bit interesting when they noticed us standing by the bar. But anyway, that's a different thing altogether. And again, Bernie Marsden came in and he was chatting away to everybody, walking through the bar and the pub as though he was just any old body. I mean, that was sort of after he'd been in Whitesnake. So that sort of sums up what he's like. If you've seen him on social media and all that stuff, he's always smiling, he's always laughing, he's respectful to all the musicians and stuff, and he's a proper bloke, I think, is what we sort of like to call him, and the fact that he likes his record collections, and he likes his guitar collections, and he likes his music, and he's quite happy to talk about it, and it's good. And we understand that he has had to cancel a few gigs recently, so hopefully he's okay, and we'll be back before too long. Anyway, back to this album then. If you're going to force me to pick out highlights, well, I've got to pick out the stomping version of the Freddie King classic, Welcome to the Palace of the King. I mean, it's a brilliant track, and Bernie Marsden does a superb performance, both with the guitar and with the voice. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, it would have been really interesting to see, or to know even, if at any early Whitesnake rehearsals or when they were first getting used to each other, they ever played this, because it's a sort of song that I could imagine Coverdale being able to do a decent version of, because again, with the whole sort of way all this sort of music thing works around, I know there will be people watching this, because hopefully the man in the attic watches my bits as well. I have to watch his bits because I have to edit them and put them all together, but he doesn't necessarily have to watch mine, so we'll find out whether he really does now, because I'm pretty sure he was at the very first Bad Company gig when they played at Charlton, I think, with the Who, or that might have been a couple of years after. Anyway, early Bad Company days, they used to play Palace of the King with Paul Rodgers singing it, and so I'm pretty sure Coverdale could have done a decent version of it as well. So that would be interesting to know if they ever did try anything like that back in the early Whitesnake days, just in rehearsals. I know lots of bands used to play tracks for warm-up that they never got close to recording or playing live, so that will be interesting. That's one of my favourites on this album. Also, the Percy Mayfield pen Send Me Someone to Love is absolutely wonderful. great track. Original Bernie Marsden tracks on it that I particularly like. Queen of the Dance Floor is great. Pebble Mill Au Revoir, that's a really funky instrumental. Whether that's got anything to do with the TV recording studios in Birmingham, I don't know. I'll probably have to check the album sleeve to check on the CD notes, but I've been getting a magnifying glass out, wouldn't it? But there used to be, for those of you outside the Midlands area, used to be back in the olden days of the 70s and 80s when daytime TV was a bit iffy and didn't start till the afternoon and all that, there used to be an afternoon news programme thing that came on, which was called Pebble Mill at 1, which was on at 1 o'clock. I think the idea was for people to watch it on their lunch break, or whether it was when sort of housewives, we don't like to say housewives anymore, but we were then, so we'll say it now, had just taken the kids back to school or whatever, and now they were going to sit down and have their little bit of time and drink their cup of soup or whatever they had in those days. And I'm going to get in right trouble here for stereotyping things. We'll just pretend it's 1970. I'm watching Pebble Mill at 1, and it was a bit like a sort of Good Morning Britain type thing. But it was only on for about half an hour. And they quite often have a music person on, so I wonder if that is something to do with that. It might be. But it's a really funky instrument anyway, and I like it, whether it's got anything to do with it or not. Go off on YouTube and see if you can find any old episodes of Pebble Mill at 1, because there were some surprising bands turned up to mime on that programme. It'll be surprising you might find, if any of the recordings still exist. What else have we got? Day and Night People, that's another one that's particularly good. Black Pit is another good instrumental, and then there's the track that's the tribute to B.B. King, Boss of the Blues. So as you can see, it's packed full of stuff. It's far removed from the album that we spoke about before of Bernie's, and About Time Too, which was far more of a standard sort of rock solo album, if you like. This is proper mainstream blues, and blues people who probably never even heard of Watch, they would pick this up and go, this bloke's good. Brilliant. I'm fortunate enough to see Bernie Marsden many, many times with many different lineups and different bands. Always top notch. Just some great albums knocking about. Some of them are difficult to get hold of. If you can see any anywhere and you haven't got them, pick them up, because they're all well worth having. And I hope to see him again live soon. And there you go. Maybe he'll come up for a third time before the end of the series. Who knows? Bernie Marsden, Stacks from 2005.
If you enjoyed this episode, please press the like and the subscribe buttons. See you soon.